is a pleasure to be back. Groupies. It is a pleasure to be back here in Denmark. Also a little bit intimidating because, you know, I flew in from Australia and your English is better than ours back there. So anyway, no offense, Cara, because she's from Australia. Sorry. Today I'm going to be talking about the perceived, that's the important word, perceived survival threats that shape us in the modern world. This is me, my bio. I think the only thing here that's probably relevant to this talk is that I'm the director of a brain center in Sydney, where a lot of patients who come through are suffering the burdens of neurodegeneration, neuropsychiatry, because of these threats that are coming in and they can no longer filter it that well. Everything becomes a threat. These complex chronic condition patients, you look at them sideways and they startle. So what is psychoneuroimmunology? It is the bidirectionality and the intersection points between psychology, behaviors, emotions, dare I say spirituality, as well as endocrinology, immunology, nervous system, and neurology. No mean feat. The majority of you who are practitioners or who see practitioners that are integrative or functional or something like that, they practice this. Essentially, did you know you have to treat a person as a whole and not just the organ system that they come in to see you about? So before we talk about my framework, which I know all of you are on the edge of your seats about, we need to talk about some fundamentals which are grounding for us with regards to this framework. Everyone's looking at my feet. Yes, I cannot wear shoes now. I have been barefoot walking and rehabilitating for 3 years, and no, my feet are not cold. Okay, so first things first, your system, your body, your mind, the number one thing it wants for you to do is survive. That's it, full stop, end of story. Thank you very much, see you tomorrow. Because it's no point you having this wonderful job or getting pregnant if you cannot survive today. That was, of course, the ancestral evolutionary issues that we were faced with before. Maslow's talked about it, Revit has talked about it. There are multitudes of frameworks about this. They're not all set in stone and they're not all, 100% foolproof, but essentially it's this. Your body wants you to survive, and physiologically, those are the safety signals it needs to know that it can go forward and do other things, like maths or poetry. Okay, because your system wants you to survive, what is the number one thing that it has at its disposal from an evolutionary perspective that it will employ without fail pretty much every single time it is faced with a threat or a perceived threat? It's inflammation, because in the short term, inflammation is protective, it's regenerative, it's rejuvenating. If you do not mount an inflammatory response, your immune system has no idea where to go. Back in the 80s, 90s, we discovered antioxidants and supplements. So we antioxidized, whatever. We threw antioxidants at patients like it was going out of fashion. You need inflammation because it is a signaling system. Inflammatory molecules are signaling molecules. They will tell you and your system where to turn on stem cells. The packages of exosomes that everyone's trying to buy these days, that is in response to inflammation. If you don't mount a robust but appropriate inflammatory response, you don't heal. People ask me about ApoE4 as far as Alzheimer's and dementia goes, because why would there be a gene in our system still that predisposes you to Alzheimer's? It doesn't make sense. That's because ApoE4 specifically is an inflammatory gene. It used to be called, I think we still do actually, but it used to be called the God gene. Because if you had some sort of viral or bacterial infection in the brain and you could mount an appropriate, robust inflammatory response against that, congratulations, you stayed in the gene pool. Of course now, and this is exactly kind of what I'm talking about in this talk today, now with the number of threats coming through, pollution, parasites, mold, just on and on and on, that inflammatory response doesn't switch off. And so now what do you have? You have your brain losing the battle, still hoping to win the war, but losing the battle, and before you know it, it's accidentally lost the war. It was trying to help and protect you. So this is actually an original framework that I came up with called the threat detection system. So with this talk, you get 2 for the price of 1. With the network of threat detection systems, essentially it's talking about the fact that when we are perceiving the environment with different systems, because you want redundancy in the system. That's how you're going to make sure that this is foolproof. When you have redundancy in the system, the different systems actually need to talk to each other, because if there's coherence, if the different systems are all seeing the same threat, boom, you know that you've actually got yourself a winner. But if one system is seeing a threat and the other systems aren't, that system goes, okay, maybe I'll just watch and wait. That's called coherence, when all the different systems, the threat detection systems, are working together. When systems start to fire off individually because they're so scared, so many things are coming through, they don't have time to get together and talk about things, that's called decoherence. And you know what happens with prolonged decoherence? It's called chaos. So I'm still talking about how the system, how the body, how the mind is perceiving the environment, external environment and internal environment. Let's talk about guardian sites. A guardian site is a part of the body that if you were going to be breached by a virus, bacteria, or parasite, it would usually come through one of these sites, okay? That's your digestive system, absolutely. Majority of things hitch a ride in your water and your food, get into your system, cause havoc. Your muscular system, no. Your muscular system is not exposed to the outside world. It is not a guardian site. The integumentary system is your skin, absolutely. Lymphatic system, no. Endocrine system, hormones, no. Nervous system, yes. The nerve endings on your fingers and feet, for example. Skeletal system, no. Reproductive systems, yes, especially for women. Respiratory system, absolutely. You will find that complex chronic conditions patients will usually have some sort of issue with their respiratory system or their gut system at the very least. Urinary system, yes. Circulatory system, no. Advanced glycation end products receptors, rage. Now, these receptors are actually picking up the non-enzymatic union of lipids and proteins to sugars. Because generally speaking, in our evolutionary past, these sugars only happen when there was extreme heat. And now we get advanced glycation end products or AGEs in abundance because that is the burden of ultra-processed foods. The problem with advanced glycation end products binding onto rage is that it turns on all these inflammatory mechanisms, and then before you know it, you are aging. That's why this is a big deal for the longevity community. This paper that we wrote in 2023 has actually now been proven this year by another few groups that have been doing very similar research to show that the burden of ultra-processed foods and having excess age in your diet is partly responsible for the rise of food allergies. Transient receptor potential ion channels, TRPS, in short, is an evolutionary ion channel that has been conserved from the nematode worm all the way up to us. I bring this up because it is one of many threat detection systems. Oh, someone's taking a photo. I'm like... and the TRPS are so evolutionary conserved, they actually respond to and are agonized by the whole plant kingdom pretty much. That's why when you're actually looking at your natural substances, so your eucalyptus oil or your CBD or your CBG or your lemongrass or whatever it is, which up until very recently was considered a little bit woo, we actually now know the receptors that it binds onto, and they are evolutionarily conserved. The problem with TRPS is that because they are so ubiquitous, they're also what we call polymodal or promiscuous. They will actually respond to lots of different things. So, take for example TRPV1, transient receptor potential vanilloid 1. It will respond to heat, to osmomechanical forces, to membrane stretch, to chemosensation, and to acids. Therefore, when TRPV1 is activated, your mind goes, okie dokie, what was it that did it? And again, it's kind of like a threat detection system because it has to check in with everything else. Did TRPV1 get activated as well as A1, V2, V4? Damn, we got ourselves osmomechanical stretch. Ooh. But if you're not able to actually like cross-reference with other threat detection systems and within the threat detection system that you're in, the brain gets a little bit confused, which is where chemicals come into play. Because modern day chemicals will bind onto certain receptors and not others and cause confusion in the system. To be honest with you, most of you guys are well. It doesn't really matter for you, but the complex chronic condition patients, the patients who are bleeding out from 1,000 paper cuts, it matters to them. That's why fundamentals matter. Getting your foundations right matters, because you not only have to remove threats, you have to increase safety signaling in the system. I think we all know about the hippocampus, hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis. That's going to give you your cortisol. And then, of course, you've got the SAS or the SAM, the sympathoadrenal medullary system, and that's going to give you your epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are threat detection systems, and they work together. Epinephrine, norepinephrine usually happens like that when there's a threat. Cortisol comes a little bit later. That dance, that symphony of cortisol and epinephrine, norepinephrine in conjunction with what is actually being happening in the system, whether it's your parasympathetic, sympathetic, or your dorsal vagal parasympathetic, that's going to tell your system whether you're safe or not, just generally, as a brief overview, right? Because it's not as if your sympathetic system is on, therefore your parasympathetic system is off. It doesn't work like that. It is a seesaw, right? So it's the concentration of cortisol. And at the what time? I don't say at the right time, I say at the what time. Because cortisol has a diurnal curve. It ramps up for the cortisol awakening response, right? Which is what wakes you up, hence the name. And then there's a slow sort of like coming down over the day. If you expose yourself to excess blue light, let's just say at night, you don't turn on your melatonin that well overnight, your cortisol is high, you don't have that nice run-up of your cortisol awakening response, you basically set yourself up for issues the whole day. We don't necessarily want no cortisol, low cortisol. We want the appropriate amount of cortisol for where you are at your time of the month for women, right? Or at the time of the year for the seasons, or at the time of your life for your age bracket. Nothing is ever good or bad. There is no such thing as like cortisol being bad. We need to stop talking about cortisol as if it's some demon hormone. It's not, right? It is what it is. It is up to us and to curate our environment and our internal environment to make sure that our cortisol is exactly where it needs to be for us. Okay, Stephen Hussey is speaking tomorrow at about, I think, 11:30. Him and I are part of the Quantum Medicine Collective. What this means is that we're talking about quantum biology, which, to be honest with you, I don't think anybody really understands, but anyway, I'm part of the group. And what this means is that we're looking at how electrons quantum tunnel their way through the electron transport chain, Clue is in the name of the mitochondria. How protons, H+, is tunneled into the intermembrane space as it's pulled off the metabolites of the citric acid cycle. And all this, the mitochondria, it's affected by light. Every single one of your protein complexes in the mitochondria, of which you have thousands, up to thousands in each cell of every organ in your body, right, is a light receptor. We only know that now in the last few years because we have the ability to see that. We didn't in the past. So what does this mean? Again, it's not that blue light is bad. You would have heard this, right? Inappropriate exposure to blue light is troublesome. Inappropriate lux at different times of day where it should be dark is troublesome. Blue light is actually absorbed by the flavins in the cytochrome constituents in protein complex 1 and 2. Red light, infrared, is absorbed by protein complex 4. Stay with me. I'm going to move on to like less technical stuff, but the most important thing is light diet, not just food diet. Light diet is important. Your electromagnetic diet is important. This is the framework that you guys all pay good money to see, right? I mean, I'm guessing that, yeah, all right, sit down, everyone, settle down. Everyone's getting so excited. The 9 ancient survival threats. Okay, so it looks a little bit complicated, and I was a big Game of Thrones fan until the last season, right? Okay, you know what I'm saying. So it has this very like old school kind of like, the veil and the plague and the beast. And then after the last season of Game of Thrones pissed me off, I was going to rename everything, but then I thought, okay, never mind. I've actually done the work. Right, so what we're going to do here, remember, 9 ancient survival threats is what I believe, in my practice, is what I have seen. When the threats are coming thick and fast, the prefrontal cortex, right, is like, okay, I understand what is happening, but I am not quite able to get on top. Oh, here we go. The ancient brain is coming to the forefront, right? Your cerebellum brainstem is like, yo, I don't think you're keeping this animal safe, human. I don't think you're keeping this animal safe. I'm going to take care of the, I'm going to take control of the helm of the boat. And so what occurs after that is seemingly these ancient responses to these modern threats that cannot be explained by conventional medicine. A lot of the time, it has all to do with your brain's perception of what is happening, as opposed to something that is objectively good or objectively bad. I'll show you as we move through. Let's start with the veil. So this is your first order filter of threat detection. This is separate to the guardian sites. The guardian sites are a place that's going to take in information from the outside world. These are your 8 senses, right? I know that there's more research talking about there being 13 senses, but let's stick with 8 for the moment. 5 that you guys all know, plus proprioception, vestibular, which is all about where you are in relation to the ground. So vestibular is where you are in relation to the ground. Proprioception is where your joints are in relation to each other. The vestibular and proprioceptive senses are about making sure that you know where you are in space so that you can run or you can fight if you need to. And then there's interoception. Interoception is the ability to know what's what in your body. Do you know when you're hungry? Do you know when you're hot or cold? That kind of stuff. Now, when there is a mismatch of what you're seeing, tasting, feeling, the brain gets very upset. This is decoherence in action. I'm going to give you a very practical example of this, right? Something that I speak to my patients about to try and increase safety signals and decrease decoherence. You're at the beach. You're wearing flip-flops or you're wearing shoes. Sensory deprivation chambers, no less. So even though you can see the sand, you can't feel the sand. That's 1. 2, sun's rays are coming in, right? It's 1 p.m. It's summer. You can't feel shit on your skin because you're wearing sunscreen. 3, you're wearing sunglasses. Your eyes, so there are visual photoacceptors in your eyes and there are non-visual photoacceptors in your eyes. They can't see the sunlit areas around you and everything seems dark. Now, for most of you who are well, that means nothing. You're fine. But for very unwell patients who've been, who've experienced trauma, who have not developed resilience skills or anything like that, patients with PTSD, the brain is screaming because it doesn't make sense. Make it make sense. You can see the sand, but you can't feel it. You can kind of understand that it's 1 p.m., but you're not really getting the signals that you should be getting. This is decoherence. So when we're trying to introduce coherence into the system, I know it looks a bit woo, but it's really quite simple. It's getting out into wide open spaces because only an apex would go out into wide open spaces, right? You're not afraid about being seen from a nearby hill by a predator. You are a predator. Grounding your feet without shoes, right? Opening your hands into a parasympathetic state because this is sympathetic, right? I've got something to hide. Your shoulders close in. Your sympathetic fibers in your neck are activated. You're in a parasympathetic state. Chest up, chin up, you're breathing. Then you're going to use your head and you're going to look at the horizon nice and slow because you're not scanning for threats. You're just proving to your brain that you can do this, okay? You're scanning and you're sweeping the horizon using your eyes backwards and forwards like they do in EMDR, right? Because what this does is it takes a little bit of effort away from the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex. And this is something I recommend my patients do every morning. Just a simple, I can search for threats if I need to. Not that I need to, I'm Predator. Hello, I'm Apex, right? But that you can. The veil is all about your system wanting to know that if you needed to, you could. When you are sat in front of a desk, on your phone, on your computer for, I do this too, I'm not saying I don't, for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, your brain, there's a part of your brain that goes, are you okay? Why are you not looking around you? What if there's a threat? Hello, you're not your mother, you don't have eyes at the back of your head, right? Like, why haven't you? It gets nervous. Just prove to it that you can. The toxin, this is pretty obvious, right? So, generally speaking, when the system feels that there is a toxin, and it doesn't even need to be true, you will actually start to have reactions. There have been 101 PNI, psychoneuroimmunology papers showing that if you tell someone, oh, whoopsie, the person that you were sitting next to had like the flu, all of a sudden people are like, oh, I don't feel well, right? And it's because your body is so good at trying to protect you even before it actually sees a virus, okay? The debris, this is an interesting one. Because essentially, of course, if there is a foreign object in your system, your body's going to want to get rid of it. Standard play. But if it can't, what does it do? Keloids, fibromas, granulomas, cysts. There is something to be said about the fact that, I think it was, someone was talking about Alzheimer's today. Max was on stage talking about Alzheimer's. Everyone is still talking about the amyloid plaque in the body, amyloid plaque in the brain, right, as being a driving force in Alzheimer's. There is a small but quite vocal group of doctors who are talking about, is the Alzheimer's amyloid plaque actually there to wall off something from the brain, right? Because there are plenty of people who have amyloid, but no dementia. And there are plenty of people who have dementia and no amyloid. So this correlation that we've made in medicine, where we're still trying to track down this amyloid and break it apart, it's unfortunately we've clung to this paradigm. And so you can only get funding, right? And this is well known in the research circles. You can only get funding for Alzheimer's drugs if part of your drug is going to be targeting amyloid, right? So that's why we're still talking about it as much as we do. It's been 35 years. They've got nothing to show for it. Elements. So this is about extremes of temperature. How do we actually see this really in practice when patients come in? Well, everybody knows that sauna is good, right? For everybody. Everybody knows that cold plunge is good, right? Ice baths and all the rest of it. We have actually seen patients come through in the last few years who are all on this contrast therapy, sauna, ice bath thing, especially the women who lose their periods. It is a hormetic stress, there is no doubt about that. And a hormetic stress is a stress that's stressful in the short term and beneficial in the long term. But if your nervous system is not quite set up and doesn't quite understand what's happening, your ancient brain can go, I'm sorry, is it winter? It's winter. No babies for you, right? And we actually do see patients lose their periods, right? And it's all about making sure that they come out of that we reconnect the coherence between their brain and their mind and their body, and that they go back into it with everything understanding what's happening and that it isn't winter. I think Mindy Pelz wrote a book called Fast Like a Girl. I'm sure someone's going to write a book called Ice Bath Like a Girl or something like that, because you know what? We're not small men, right? And so it has to be treated differently. And I'll tell you now, if you're in your luteal phase, right? That's my excuse, actually. I'm always in my luteal phase. But if you're in your luteal phase, fasting excessive exercise, and definitely cold plunging is not a good idea. Progesterone actually increases core temperature, right? And so the contrast feels even worse for you. But luteal phase is when your body is kind of needing for you to nourish it, and putting it through extremes like that can sometimes be perceived as a threat. Famine, again, Mindy Pels, fast like a girl. Do you know why? Because when all these like influencers, male influencers, I love men, but male influencers are all talking about 16-8 and all that kind of 16 hours of fasting in a day, 8 hours within which to eat all your calories. And then women do so. Many women do well. Some women do not. Because you may have inadvertently turned on the famine switch in your brain, where your system is like, okay, I know that the prefrontal cortex is talking about autophagy, but is it really? I'm not sure. I don't know. Is it maybe famine? Okay, well, no babies for you, until it figures it out. So that's why this is all about bringing in coherence back into the system, making sure that your mind and your body are talking to each other in an appropriate way. So there we go, radiation. All right, this is kind of where quantum medicine comes into play as well. I don't think that I really need to talk to you guys about the fact that it has been shown time and time again in the literature that certain EMFs absolutely increase calcium signaling into the cell and can cause damage. Right? Please be careful about, sleeping with the Wi-Fi on and charging your phone next to your head and so on and so forth. Just understand that the transient receptor potential ion channels and other receptors in the cell do respond to electromagnetic frequencies because the cell is an electromagnetic frequency device. The cell membrane carries a charge. It's called a membrane potential. And only when you change the charge on the membrane do things move in and out. If you go to Stephen's talk tomorrow, I'm pretty sure he'll actually be talking about structured water. Water that carries information and carries a charge all on its own. Like, this is a big topic to delve in, and not in 3 minutes, but we were evolutionarily not meant to live in the electromagnetic smog that we do at the moment. The beast. Okay, so this is where your system doesn't know, of course, if there is a saber-toothed tiger or a mother-in-law, right, in the perimeters of your village. What it can see is epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. And when it's trying to see the cause of your stress, it doesn't quite understand from an evolutionary ancient perspective Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations that just don't work, right? What it does see is just the hormones. And when it cannot figure out the cause of the hormone, the cause of the excess cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, at some point it's going to go, I don't know what's wrong. But the safest place for you is a cave. Lights become too bright. Sounds become too loud. You don't want to hang out with people you don't know. You just want to stay home and you just want to be with loved ones. This is called depression, also known clinically or in the laboratory as sickness-like behavior, which you can induce in mice by giving them inflammatory molecules, right? Don't forget that depression is a consequence of inflammation of the brain. And remember, the system turns on inflammation when it's afraid, when it perceives a threat, when it's trying to protect you. The plague is pretty obvious. We all went through the right? I don't get into trouble, but you know what I'm saying, right? The tribe. Did you know that the system, that our evolutionary makeup is so wired for connection, for society, for, dare I say, love, right? That there's a part of your brain, the dorsal ACC, anterior cingulate cortex, which will actually light up like a Christmas tree in social isolation, as if you were going through pain. That's how much your system wants you to be connected to others. We see this a lot, of course, now, especially younger people after what happened in the last few years coming through, and they just don't respond to cues to social cues as much as they would have before the pandemic. Anyway, this is the last of the archetypes, but the conclusions here, P&I, everything is connected to everything. Everything is connected to everything. For clinicians, it means that we have more levers to pull if I need to. I can help you change your diet. If you don't want to eat, I can help you, I can help you with your gut issues if you don't want to change your diet by helping you change your sleep, right? Or change your hormones, or whatever. Threats are many, and they are subjective. One person's, I don't know what you're upset about, is another person's, no, seriously, I get urticaria, I get rashes when I walk past the cold fridge at a grocery store. They're subjective. Your body, I truly believe this, I really, really do. Your body and mind are always trying to protect you, even if it seems maladaptive in this day and age. And lastly, effective treatments, we need to stop chasing these weird and wonderful things. There is absolutely a place for it, 100%. I also like my regenerative stuff, my stem cells, my exosomes, blah, 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 blah. But you gotta get your fundamentals right, and the fundamentals are free. Thank you very much.